What does it look like to love someone you disagree with?
In a world where conflict over politics, theology, and personal preferences is rampant, even in the church, Loving Disagreement offers a better way.
This 4-week series at Sycamore Creek Church explores how the work of God's Spirit can guide us toward love in the midst of tension.
You'll discover how Spirit-led relationships can heal divisions
and create space for grace.
Michal, Kathy Kong writes, "Some of the most faithful people I know are people with whom I disagree." I resonate with that. I wrestle with that statement. I also resonate with that statement, Michal.
Same.
You know, there are incredibly faithful people who I disagree with about all sorts of things, like scientific findings or health policy or human sexuality or the role of government. I could go on. But faithfulness doesn't determine agreement.
Yeah.
We're going to have to return to that again and again today. For example, I know faithful Christians who believe that God created the world, everything, in 6 days, and that was a couple thousand years ago. And I absolutely disagree with that.
Right.
Like, I think they're wrong. As a scientist, as a biologist, I think that our world is billions of years old, and God has created everything over billions of years, and God's still creating today. We disagree, and yet they're faithful.
Sure.
So, what do you think of this statement of Kathy Kong? Some of the most faithful people I know are people with whom I disagree.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I've got some folks that I know who are very faithful. They've sacrificed a lot for their faith to follow Jesus. They've given up opportunities and moved their family and all kinds of stuff. And they don't believe women can be pastors.
Oh.
And these are the kinds of, like, they're lifetime relationships. They're going to be at family functions, like holiday dinners, and they're wrong. Here I am, a woman and a pastor.
Look at that. You're real.
I exist. I'm not a myth, like a mythological creature. And yet I see that they're faithful, and I see that, well, we disagree really deeply on that.
Yeah. Faithfulness doesn't determine agreement.
Exactly.
So today we're headed again toward Loving Disagreement, and we're using a book of that name, Loving Disagreement. It's by these two authors, Kathy Kong and Matt Michalatos. And they don't always agree on everything, and they've been modeled that in this book where they disagree about different things. And we're using that book to, kind of help us move us toward loving disagreement.
So Matt and Kathy are trying to help us move toward this idea of loving disagreement, where we're not like demonizing people or dehumanizing people that we disagree with, but we're moving toward a place where we can disagree with them and love them at the same time. It's loving disagreement. And this is part of our series, the deep dive that we've been doing on the Sermon on the Mount. And we're looking at Matthew chapters 5-7. And that sermon has inspired all the topics that we've had in our series since last September.
Yes. So when we disagree with people, it's really tempting to judge them, to demonize them, to, I don't just disagree with you, but you're a bad person because you don't believe women should be pastors or whatever it might be. And Jesus is so good at putting his finger on this and being like, well, here's the issue. And in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus says, "Do not judge so that you may not be judged. For the judgment you give will be the judgment you get, and the measure you give will be the measure you get." So again, judging is when we think or say, not only are you wrong, like I disagree with you, but you're a bad person.
Right.
Like you can't be good because of that. And Jesus is saying, don't do that.
Right.
He's pretty clear. Like do not judge, or that's the measure you'll be judged by. And I can think someone is wrong about how God created everything, and it doesn't make them a bad person if we disagree. And so we're taking those words of Jesus about judgment, and we're applying them to disagreement, and how can we be more loving in our disagreement?
Right. So if we're following Jesus, then our lives ought to be shaped by Jesus, shaped by God, God's Spirit, and God's Spirit is with us, changing us, influencing us, even as we're disagreeing with each other. The Apostle Paul was a missionary in the early church, and he talks about this idea in a letter to the church in Galatia about how we're changed by God's Spirit. And he uses this image of fruit, like the fruit of our lives is marked by the Holy Spirit. And this is what he says. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, generosity or goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. So loving disagreement is going to be shaped by that fruit, by the fruit of the Spirit. And even the way that we disagree with each other, I mean, like all of our lives is going to be changed by that. And so today we're going to be talking about that fruit, faithfulness, and how faithfulness might affect the ways that we show up in disagreement. So we're going to talk about the ways that faithfulness changes how we show up in disagreement. And a few minutes ago, we mentioned this idea, this kind of bold statement that faithfulness doesn't determine agreement. Now, it's probably going to be helpful for us to define faithfulness, and we'll get to that in a minute. But
yes, we will.
We want to give people a chance to reflect. What do you think about faithfulness, and how are you processing this? So here's our first question for discussion. Faithfulness doesn't determine agreement. What's your response to that statement? Or how would you define faithfulness?
Michal, faithfulness is yet another tricky topic in this Loving Disagreement series. And faithfulness I call it squishy. Like it's kind of hard to get. So we're going to start with what is faithfulness? And Kathy Kong addresses that question by answering this way. Faithfulness is faith in action, the act of believing and trusting. And it's a helpful reminder. Like I think part of the reason it's squishy is we're all faithful in some way. Like we all have faith in something. And you know, we believe and we act in certain ways based on what we believe. And for followers of Jesus, our faith, of course, is in God. It's in Jesus. And then we live from that. And that's maybe sort of the ideal for how we would live out. But most of us, we put our faith in all sorts of different things. Yeah. Like, you know, we might put our faith in ourselves. We might put our faith in the stock market. We might put our faith in a political party. We might put our faith in a job that we have. Like, you know, we all put our faith in something, and we have faith in something. And it's important to recognize that as we talk about faithfulness, this isn't something that just Christians have or that we just have in Jesus. It's messy. And so we're exploring faithfulness today as a fruit of the Spirit in disagreement. In disagreement. And well, if we claim to be a follower of Jesus, the heart of that claim is putting our faith in Jesus. And when we do that, faithfulness doesn't start with me. Faithfulness starts with who God is.
Yeah, so as we discuss the fruit of the Spirit, it's helpful to remember that all of the things in that list from the Apostle Paul, those are all descriptions of God's character.
Yeah, they are. Who God is.
It starts with God. God is love. God is peace. God is patience. God is faithful. God is the creator of everyone and everything. And God cares for God's creation. God cares for each one of us. God is faithful not just to some human beings, but to everyone. Not just the people who think they've got it all figured out. It's easy, I think, as followers of Jesus to talk about how everyone bears God's image. But we don't always stop and think about what that actually means. And that means all people.
Yeah, all people.
All people. Even the people that I disagree with, even the people that I think are completely wrong, even the people who think women can't be pastors, like all people. There are some folks that I think some days I would like to exclude from that category, if I'm really honest. So one of the things that we have to wrestle with as followers of Jesus is that nobody, not even us, we don't have a corner.
Not even pastors, not even you and me, huh?
No, on the market of faithfulness.
We don't.
And as Kathy Kong notes, what I find so challenging is that faithfulness is not only found in the people with whom I share values and beliefs.
That's really hard, I think, to get our heads wrapped around, because often when we think of faithfulness, we think of the people who think the same things we do as the people who are faithful. And Kathy is kind of pushing us in this to expand what we think of when we think of faithfulness. Like, people can be faithful in ways that are different than how we're faithful. I regularly walk past the Islamic Center in East Lansing, and it is a busy, bustling place. I'm always just amazed at the number of Muslims who gather there and how many of them are there. Like, sometimes their parking lot is completely full, and like they're using the church parking lot next door because they don't have enough space for all the people who are there. And it's really humbling to me as a Christian leader to just see the faithfulness of the people who are there, who are gathering to worship. And while there are real disagreements between Christians and Muslims, don't get me wrong, there are very real disagreements, it's always a reminder to me that Christians aren't God's only image bearers. And that's particularly true when it comes to faithfulness. Faithfulness, it's who God is. And so this is this incredible diversity of faithfulness then. So if faithfulness is who God is, then all of us and all the different ways that we live out faithfulness represent the image of the God who has created us, who is faithful. So again, faithfulness starts with who God is.
And, I mean, yes, and as a follower of Jesus, like, our Christian faithfulness, it still matters. It still means something. And in particularly because the world still needs the message of Jesus. The world still needs the good news of Jesus, the gospel. And Jesus talks about what this means, about what the good news is in his being here on earth. And this is what he says. He's quoting the prophet Isaiah. And he says, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to bring good news to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim release to the captives and recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." So if we've received this good news, well, the challenge to us is then to live in a way that reflects that good news. And we need to learn that God's faithfulness and love, they're for everyone and not just for us. We reflected earlier on something that Kathy Kong wrote. She said, "Some of the most faithful people I know are people with whom I disagree." So one example of how this might play out is with people of different faiths, like the Muslims who attend the Islamic Center. But faithfulness to Jesus also pushes us into relationship with other faithful followers of Jesus. And while there are going to be plenty of things that we disagree on as Christians, what we do agree on is Jesus. And faithfulness lived out, it doesn't necessarily look like uniformity. Like, we don't have to agree on all the things, but we can have unity in Jesus. It's faithfulness amid all of those differences as we center ourselves on Jesus.
Yeah. And I think it's clear as we're talking about this that, like, we can start with who God is and focus on who God is, but very quickly that goes into how we interact with other people and like how we live out faithfulness. It's impossible for us in our perspective to like separate who God is from how we live out faithfulness. And so let's get into that and let's explore more how faithfulness extends to the people around us. But first, let's pause for a chat question. We've been talking about faithfulness, and we've been talking about it's who God is. It's reflected in the diversity of ways that people can be faithful and all sorts of, within Christianity, yes, but then even in other faiths and for other things. And we're headed toward extending faithfulness to those around us. So here's our second question for discussion today. If you saw each person as bearing the image of a faithful God, how might that change how you disagree with them? Let's take a moment and let's discuss that. So, Michal, we're moving into faithfulness that extends to the people around us. And one of the ways that begins is by leaving our comfort zone. I mention that because I think all too often we think of faithfulness too narrowly. We're faithful only to the people who are similar to us. And if faithfulness starts with who God is, again, like that's our starting point, and it extends to all image bearers of all of us, basically all human beings, then I need to like expand my definition of faithfulness a little bit and leave my comfort zone.
So Kathy Kong has some really practical ways that we can build that practice of leaving our comfort zones. And one of the things that she points out is that people with marginalized identities, whether they be their racial identity, being a person of color, or being disabled, or part of the LGBTQ community, folks in some of those communities tend to live outside their comfort zone almost all the time. And for those of us who don't have a marginalized identity in the same way, well, maybe we could learn something from folks who are doing that all the time. Yeah. So for instance, we might find comfort in being around other people who have the same racial identity. I mean, you mentioned like being around people who have the same religious identity, but like another way that we could approach this is through racial identity. And so we might demonstrate our faithfulness to leave that comfort zone by doing things like learning from folks who are like Black authors or educators. We might watch a documentary, like we had the John Perkins Lunch and Learn a couple of years ago. We might listen to podcasts by non-white people or by non-Christians. We might attend workshops and learn from the folks like at the Justice League. Yeah. We might attend the Martin Luther King Jr. Luncheon, or watch a movie or show that features a non-white majority cast. And all of those things might eventually progress deeper into having meaningful friendships or relationships with people who are not white, but that's not really where we start. It's helpful to start with doing some listening, doing some like reading and educating ourselves, or being educated by folks who are teaching in that space. And that would start by giving voice to folks who are different from us, even folks who disagree with us. There's an incredible beauty to this sort of faithfulness where we're recognizing like the divine spark in other people and God's image in other people. When we leave our comfort zones, we find opportunities to live out the fruit of the Spirit, the fruit of faithfulness in new ways. And we can be faithful with everyone, not just the people who act and think like us.
This is not easy to do.
Oh, no.
And again, it's not what most of us gravitate toward. So faithfulness extends to others by leaving our comfort zone. Another way that we are faithful is by sharing our faithfulness. So our faith and our acts of faith, they can be deeply personal and deeply meaningful to us, but they aren't just for us. Like faith isn't just for us so like we can get to heaven someday or something. Like our faithfulness is meant to be shared with others. It's meant to draw others into curiosity about God and who God is. And well, our faith in action is to be shared because it's beautiful and because it's life-giving. Our faithfulness isn't just fruit of a relationship with God, it's fruit that is shared with those around us. Godly faithfulness produces good fruit. And our faithfulness, like all aspects of a Spirit-filled life, is meant to have a noticeable impact on the lives and the world around us. Faithfulness supports the Spirit's work, transforming our reactions and relationships with love and patience and kindness.
So what does this look like in real life to share our faithfulness? I think it could look like sharing our faith, but with our actions and not just our words. So let's dig into this a little bit. With a little bit of help from AI, we came up with some key components of faithfulness. And these key components of faithfulness, they impact our friendships, our coworkers, our neighbors, our partners. We're going to briefly look at a few of these components so we can get a sense of how this might show up in disagreement. So our first component of faithfulness is loyalty, which is like consistent and steadfast support for someone or something. We can be consistent and steadfast even in disagreement, and that's a kind of faithfulness.
It is.
I think it's easy to think of this in terms of like a marriage relationship or a partnership, but what if we extended this to our other committed relationships? I'll let you in on a little secret.
Okay.
I don't always agree with you or Pastor Tom.
I can understand Tom, but me? I mean, come on.
It's shocking, right?
Yeah, that's true. We don't always agree.
Venture a guess that you all don't always agree with me either.
That's true.
And the three of us have all been appointed to Sycamore Creek Church by our bishop. And part of us being faithful to our calling to Sycamore Creek and to the relationships we have with each other is disagreeing well and like letting each other know kindly, like when we disagree, and trusting that like we can do that, and that's a reflection of our faithfulness to the work here.
Yeah, it's super helpful to think of how loyalty can be a huge part of our relationships. It's one of the ways we live out faithfulness. Another component of faithfulness is commitment. So commitment is an adherence to promises, vows, or principles, a dedication to seeing tasks or duties through to completion. And this commitment idea is a hard one right now, I think, in our culture, because we live in a cancel culture. What happens if we find someone who doesn't completely adhere to what we think or what we believe, we cancel them. We're like, we're done. I don't want to have anything to do with you. And I'm not saying it's not important to stand up for what's right. It is important to stand up for what's right. It's also important to oppose injustice. And maybe we have some room to grow in our faithfulness to the commitments that we make to certain things and to certain people. Now, commitment to another person or commitment to an organization, it's really hard. And so when you join Sycamore Creek Church as a partner, we ask people to make some commitments as part of that. And it's commitments that people make to partner with Sycamore Creek in our mission, but it's also commitments that the church, the body that we are at Sycamore Creek, makes to that person to partner with them as we fulfill the mission that we have. Now, we commit to living out our mission. That's what but we also commit to living out our values together. Yeah. We commit to a strategy of connecting, growing, and serving that moves us toward our mission. And then we commit to these measures of doing no harm and doing good and staying in love with God that are all part of this mission that we have as a church. And that's all really easy to do when we agree. Yeah. It is way harder to live out those commitments in the midst of disagreement. Yeah. But we share our faithfulness when we take our commitments seriously and we do our best to work through those disagreements together.
So a third component to faithfulness is trustworthiness, which could be described as being dependable and reliable, where one's actions align with their words and commitments. So faithfulness can be expressed or shared by expressing yourself clearly, even amid disagreement. It's like making a commitment that when you disagree with someone, you're going to talk to that person about your commitment, or maybe at the least not talk to that person and say one thing and then go tell someone else something else. Yeah. Right?
Yes. That's really important.
There's lots of like you don't want to do that, especially if the person you're talking to isn't someone who's going to help you go and resolve the conflict or the disagreement with the other person.
There's almost like an honesty and an integrity involved in being trustworthy too. That's part of faithfulness.
100%. It's a really huge deal to be trustworthy amid disagreement. It's a form of faithfulness.
So a final key component of faithfulness is truthfulness. And this is, you can see how these kind of all tie together, but being accurate and true to facts and standards. And again, Michal, I think this is kind of a difficult one in our culture right now. Yeah. Like we disagree a lot on what truth is even right now. Yeah. And faithfulness is shown when we're very careful about what we consider to be true. So if we make an assertion, we're checking our own bias and like the sources that we've consulted with to come up with that. We try to confirm things that we say are facts or truth that we're putting forward. Now, being truthful doesn't mean we'll disagree. We won't always agree that we won't disagree.
Right.
But it does mean that we're going to each do our best as far as we can to be truthful in the midst of disagreement and to have facts that are actually facts and truth that's actually truth.
So Kathy Kong gives some other examples in the book about how faithfulness sort of interacts with the other fruit of the Spirit. Yeah. She notes that the other fruit of the Spirit are woven into faithfulness. So like our love for others is faithful. We treat others lovingly even when we're not like in love with them, right? We
don't feel like it.
Maybe we don't even really like them very much, especially when we're disagreeing with them.
Yes.
We might say that our patience is faithful. It's not dependent on our circumstances or how much margin we have or how well rested we are. Our kindness is faithful. And that means like we're not playing favorites. We're kind even to people that we have the deepest disagreements with.
Yeah.
We're going to have some people that we're closer to than others, and that's really normal. But faithfulness is seeking out and being kind with people, even the people that we disagree with. And I'm going to add to her list and say that our boundaries are faithful, which is sort of an interesting way to look at it. Disagreement is one thing, but harm is another. And so we're faithful to others when we step back from that harm. Faithfulness doesn't mean like brushing aside the harm. It can be loving and patient to have good boundaries. One of the ways that I think about this is in a dynamic that I've had with my husband, Nathan, where I learned really early on as a child to sort of tend to the emotions of the people around me, because I found that if I didn't, I might get the cold shoulder or something like that. Like there was a sense of abandonment that might happen. And I carried that into my marriage.
Okay.
So whenever...
something that worked well for you as a kid.
Was at least a survival mechanism,
now
right?
You're married to Nathan, and how did that work?
So whenever I would notice a change in his behavior, it would be exaggerating probably to say that he's like huffing and puffing, but like, you know, I'd notice something and are you okay? Are you upset? And I'd try to sort of, immediately I'd assume that he's mad at me about something. And usually I'd try to figure out what it was, and then I'd get like defensive in advance. Like, this is why is, you know, but just like 3 years ago. So after we had been married for like 15 years, I recognized what was happening and how like that was something I learned as a child. It was no longer helping me. And I said, I'm going to stop doing this. I'm going to stop in like asking you if you're upset instead of waiting for you to come to me when you're upset. And he told me, and he gave me permission to share this.
That's
like,
good. I'm glad you got that.
That at first it bothered him when I said, I'm not going to do this emotional work for you anymore. And some of that is because it had been 15 years. And anytime you make a change like that, it's difficult. But that now he would look at that change and say, that was actually really helpful to me because it's forced me to pay more attention to my own emotional landscape and to take ownership of it, to take responsibility for it.
Yeah, so like having a good boundary in your relationship with Nathan, it led to like greater faithfulness for both of you.
Yeah.
That's just a great example of how a boundary can be loving and faithful in the midst of a relationship.
So when we believe in a faithful God, then we show up to our disagreements faithfully. And to be faithful even while disagreeing, it's really uncomfortable. It is difficult work. It's hard to continue to see people as image bearers even when we disagree with them deeply. We still have some work to do in faithful disagreement. So we have another question for discussion here. What is one way you'd like to work on living out faithfulness in disagreement? It might be in loyalty, commitment, trustworthiness, truthfulness, or good boundaries. Let's take a minute to talk about it.
So Michal, not like vilifying or demonizing someone in the midst of disagreement it's so hard to do. It's really tempting. Churches are messy. People are messy, groups of people are messy, denominations are messy. Like there is a lot of messiness as we look at faithfulness. And as I look back, like we are part of a Christian tradition where the faithfulness is messy. And I'm a part of that tradition. Like my own faithfulness is messy and complex. It's not simple as we look at this stuff. And I'm so grateful that I don't have to be perfect to be faithful. And that's one of the things I take away from all this mess as I look back is I don't need to be perfect and I don't need to get everything right in order to be faithful. Again, because we look at God, and God is the one who is faithful. And so we can extend to others in recognizing imperfections that we extend faithfulness to others by recognizing our imperfections.
And notice that we're focusing here on recognizing our perfections.
Our
This is
imperfections.
important.
It's not about other people.
Right. It would be easy. I feel like I can pretty easily spot imperfections in other people, but like this is really focusing on ourselves. And this idea is really taken right out of Jesus' Sermon on the Mount, where he says, "Why do you see the speck in your neighbor's eye, but do not notice the log in your own eye? Or how can you say to your neighbor, 'Let me take the speck out of your eye,' while the log is in your own eye? You hypocrite! First take the log out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to take the speck out of your neighbor's eye." It would be really good if the safest place for us to be messy and imperfect were with other believers.
Yeah.
But we know that that's not always the case. Followers of Christ have not always done a good job creating a space where it's safe to be human and imperfect. We all hesitate when we feel judged, and that hesitation can cause us to miss what being faithful really means.
So the mission of Sycamore Creek is to ignite authentic life in Christ and fan it into an all-consuming flame. And when we look at that mission statement, right embedded in there is authentic, and one of the means of authentic is to be real or to be true. And as I think about our church and how we live out our mission, I think one of the things that we want to be as a healthy church, and a healthy church doesn't hide messiness or imperfections. Like a healthy church is open about those things and direct and is addressing those imperfections. And so I think if someone were to look at our church, we shouldn't look perfect. Right. Like part of being real is that there are flaws, there are disagreements, there are imperfections, and we're faithful in the mission of Sycamore Creek when we live out that authentic part together. And the mission of our church is accomplished when we confront our imperfections together faithfully. Again, faithfulness it's a fruit of God's Spirit at work in us. We will be more faithful. It starts with who God is. God is faithful. And then it extends to others by when we do things like when we leave our comfort zone. It extends to others when we share our faithfulness with others. And there's a beauty in a diversity of faithfulness that honors God. Not when it's just to the people who are like us or the insiders or whatever, but when we expand that faithfulness. And in the midst of sharing that faithfulness with others, we don't just share our strengths and our successes, but we also share our imperfections and our weaknesses.
Being faithful in disagreement is really messy. It's going to challenge us. It's not comfortable or easy.
Being faithful in disagreement is going to force us to hold what we believe loosely and to be open to new ways of believing, new ways of acting, new ways of being faithful.
Living faithfully is an invitation to revisit our beliefs really throughout our lives, because our beliefs, they're not going to be set. They're not going to be fixed. They're going to change and grow as we change and grow.
Faithfulness invites us to come together, even when it's difficult, even when it's challenging, even when it's awkward.
When we commit to faithfulness, to true faithfulness that's rooted in unity, not uniformity, we'll live out God's presence. We'll find God's presence among us, and we'll live out the truth that the good news is good news for everybody.
Details right. So Chisholm is the guy who wrote this beloved hymn.
Sorry, bug just fell on my hair.
Great.